Hi, I'm Corey. Welcome to Creating with Scraps. Today I'm going to share a variation of One Sheet Wonder. Instead of making one folio piece, I'm going to show 4 different ephemera pieces that you can make with one sheet of 12 by 12 paper. And at the end, I'll show an option that you can use with one sheet of 12 by 12 and then a scrap of something else, just as a variation or an option. And I'd also had a question about how to make the little mini file folders and what process I use, and you know, these are pretty common, but I'll show those really quickly. They're a super quick project to make, so I'll show that at the very end. All right, for this one, the way I'm doing it is I am not using eyelets, you know, the standard eyelets for these policy closure pieces. And I decided to make all of these using policy closures. 1, because I like them, and 2, because I liked the idea of keeping it together as a theme, options with policy closures. So what I used was a hole punch, and this one I believe is 5/8 inch. Yeah, it's about a 5/8 inch. You can use a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, just something right around that dimension. I used some string. You can use anything you've got, embroidery floss or ribbon or lace or what have you, but I use string for these policy closures. And I used a couple different sizes of brads. These are the standard brads. I believe most of these are the Tim Holtz ones. And then I've got some of the super tiny ones, and I used a variety of them on here. These just are not large brads, though you can certainly use those too. All right. When I'm making multiple things, or when I have leftover cardstock, this is one of my go-tos for scrap busters with cardstock. I will punch a whole bunch of circles because I use them a lot. Well, you know, I like them with the policy closure, but I use them for other things as well. So I'll just punch a whole bunch of circles and use these, and I'll set them up in advance. Now, when I'm making the top of the policy closures, I want it a little bit thicker or a little bit sturdier than most standard weight cardstock. So what I do, and this is just personal preference, you can certainly use thicker cardstock, but I like to use up the scraps that I've got. So I will go around about the edges of my circle, and I'll grab a couple layers. If it's really thin paper, maybe I'll do 3 layers. If it's a little bit thicker, maybe I'll do 2. And then I just put the glue down and put another disc on top. And then I use my fingers to spin it around so that it's lined up. And I do the same thing. So this one's a little bit thinner cardstock, so there are 3 layers there. And then I just put it aside. And a lot of times, because I always ink, I'll ink it right then and there so that it's done and ready to go. And then I have a stash of these in a little bin. And that is how I make my base for my policy closure. Now, if I'm putting an eyelet in here, I do it a little bit differently. I punch a small hole first, just simply because I find it easier to line up the larger hole. And I'll show you what I mean. Let me grab another piece of cardstock. So here's just a white piece. I will put the smaller hole in first, like this. And then I will use my larger circle and line it up. Oh, I think you can see it there. Simply because, and I may not get it perfect, but it's a whole lot easier, I find, to put the center hole in first and then the larger hole second, or the making it into a circle second. And then I'll do it like that. And again, I'll do a bunch at once. And then that way. Now I use it this way when I'm putting an eyelet in here, because you set an eyelet a little bit differently. But when I'm using brads like I am today, I do not punch a hole until the end. So that's the disc portion, or the policy closure portion of this. All right, so the 4 that I'm making with one sheet of 12 by 12, and these 2 are the same thing. They are just opened on different sides. One opens to the right, one opens to the left. And I put a couple little pieces here to show you. Now these are not decorated, other than on some of them I put a few beads at the bottom of the string just because, but you don't have to do that, of course. So this one opens like this, and there's a tuck on the right, there is a tuck on the left, and then it opens up, and then I used a scrap of paper to put another tuck here, and then there's a little notepad underneath. So super simple, just a little flip over. And then this one I put string on the back because I would take this particular one and glue it down onto my page, and then I've got a pocket back here as well. So using the just taping down the string on the back worked fine. And this is the exact same thing, only it's oriented to the other way. So there's a tuck and then a tuck and a policy closure like this with a notepad, and then instead of putting a side pocket, I used another scrap to make just a basic pocket. All right, so that's one of the 4 pieces that we're going to make. I'll do that. So there's one. This other one is a super simple, just gatefold. Super simple. Maybe even too simple, but it's just a simple gatefold. You can put notepads on the inside. You can put notepads in the center. You can put a pocket on the center. This particular one uses a pocket. And then when you glue it down, you can obviously put a pocket on the back, or a lot of times if I make this a little bit longer, you can use this as a belly band with a center fold or gatefold pocket. Okay, so and these two are the same ones, just longer than the other. I put a few beads on the bottom of this one, but it's the same idea. Little pocket on the bottom, and then this has 2 little side tuck pockets right here on both of those. And again, I just used scrap for that. I sure hope I was in frame for the other one. I wasn't looking at my screen, so my apologies if they're not in frame. So that's the second piece that we'll be making. This third one is very similar, but it has a fold over. So this folds over, open, I should say, folds open. And then you've got 2 tuck spots on the right and on the left, just like that. And this one, it just has a little overlap there, and I put the policy closures on the outside edge on this one, and on the other one I put them on the inside. And you can obviously do either way just to change up the look. So you can see they're the same exact thing, but I put the policy closures together and on the top for that one. And I'll show you, it doesn't really change the inside very much. But here I put just a tiny little long strip notepad, but I've still got my pockets here and here. So similar, but just enough different to, add a little bit of variety or interest. So there's that. And then this last one is, I did one as a 4-inch and one as a 3-inch, but they're the same thing. And it's got just a simple pocket in the front and a simple pocket in the back. And that's it. It's super, super quick, super easy. You can tuck it in loose or paper clip it in, or you can tuck it inside of a pocket and then lift it out later on. Here, because I had a fold in the paper, before gluing it together, I sewed a strip of sari silk on it just to add a little bit of interest. And yeah, there you go. Same exact thing for the inside. On this one, here I put a little notepad, right? Just a super basic pocket, but again, focusing on the policy closure. All right, so let me show you how I make those. And I know that some of these you've seen before. I'm sure of it, or maybe you've seen all of them before. I don't know. I just started playing one day and thought, how can I do this quickly and easily to use up some 12 by 12 paper? Now, I like to use double-sided cardstock for this. I have quite a bit of the Tim Holtz cardstock left, so I will use that. I know that other people have said, wait a minute, you can't get that anymore. Well, many people like me have, we have just a little bit of it saved up because we knew it was going out. And so I'm just going to grab the first piece on my stash. And the ones I'm using are either from Wallflower or Memoranda. I also have the correspondence kit in here, but I think this one's either from Wallflower or Memoranda, if you can get a hold of those. Okay, and I've got my directions here. I've got my pieces. They're off to the side. The shadows were bothering me, so I put down a cutting mat to cut back on the glare, so I'm really hoping that we'll get less shadows this time. And I like my glass mat, even though there's glare on it, because it's magnetic and I can use these chess piece style magnetic holders. but for the sake of filming and the glare being obnoxious, I'm going to try it this way. All right, so just a 12 by 12 piece of paper, and the very first thing I'm going to do is my cuts. And the first cut is that I'm going to keep this a 12 by 12 length, and I'm going to cut a 3-inch strip. Now this one is going to be, I'm just going to cut it off the top. It honestly doesn't matter. You can cut these however you want. The nice thing about Tim Holtz paper is even though one side is directional, there's a lot of different directions that you can use in this, and it works out just fine. But for the sake of ease here, I'm going to turn the whole thing sideways, and I need a 12 by 3-inch strip. And maybe I'll just use, I don't even know which one I'm going to use. Sometimes I'll let the pattern of the paper determine what I'm going to do. And for this case, this is going to go on its side, so maybe I'll do this. All right, so 3 inches, and I'm cutting it there. So I cut a 3 by 12 strip. Now I'm going to turn it, and I want 3 4-inch sections. So I've got 12 by 9 is my remaining piece, and I'm cutting in these into 3 4-inch sections. 1, and then I'll use my smaller trimmer after this just for the sake of ease. And they don't have to be, they can be 3.5 inches, or they can be 3 inches, or what have you. The dimensions aren't as important as I just wanted to use an entire sheet of paper, 12 by 12 paper. So if you've got scraps or things, you can still make these easily, absolutely, but with what you've got on hand rather than, cutting down a 12 by 12 sheet. Okay, so here, for those of you who like to take a screenshot, let me zoom in just a little bit for you. There is a screenshot of the cuts, and I'll let you do that. Okay. This 12-inch strip. Let's do this one first since it's easy. And the 12-inch strip is this guy. I had 2 different, because I was playing with them, 2 different ones. Okay, this is the 12-inch strip. Now, honestly, I could decorate this a lot. I can put things here. I can put things here. This is a super great one. I really like this pocket. Easy, quick, and just adds a little bit of interest to your pages. All right, so this one, I'm going to use my small scoreboard. I've had this one for several years. It's the Score Buddy. Oh, let me zoom back out a little bit. Score Buddy, it's the small one. And most of the time I can flip what I'm doing around. So this works just great for it. And that's what I'm going to do here. If you've got the larger scoring tool, great. And if you don't have a scoring tool, a lot of times you can use a trimmer or a cutter as a score tool. And just, put your trimmer or cutter down, look at the measurement you want, and then crease it along those edges. So it works essentially the same way. This is convenient, and so that's what I'm going to use. This one, it says I score it at 1.5 inches and 4.5 inches. So I'm going to do that. 1.5 and 4.5. And then flip it around. I'm going to do a 180, and I'm going to score it again at 1.5 and 4.5. All right, and that's all the scoring I'm going to do for this one. And then I can decide which do I want inside, which do I want outside, right? And let's see. This is what it's going to end up looking like. So maybe I like this, but I also like this. I think maybe I will, let's see, I could do it that way, or I could do it this way. No, I don't like that as well. So let's see. So this will be my base here. I do like that. And then maybe I'll do this and this. So you can see I can change up how I do this piece, right? Whatever I want on top. And I can also flip it around. Do the same thing here. Don't really love that. I like that better. But I don't love that. Well, gosh, I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter. I like this red. I like the contrast. So maybe I'll do it like this. Okay. Though there is a bit of, you know what, I can put tape on there if I need to, because there's a bit of a tear from where I pulled it out of the booklet. All right, I'm going to do it this way. Okay, ink. I'm going to ink this edge before I do anything else, simply because I'm going to glue this piece down first. So I'm going to ink this edge, and I'm going to glue this down. So it's going to be not that one, it's going to be this one, with the tuck on the right, and then the tuck over here on the left. So I'm going to glue this down, and I'm going to glue just along the top. Oh, I had this open too long. Let's see if I can get that unstuck. I'm going to glue just along the top and bottom edges to make a side tuck. Now, while I'm doing the rest of it, a lot of times I will just use clips to hold this in place. It's going to dry either way. I just feel like it gives it a tighter bond and a better bond to do it like this. Okay, this one is a single, I'm only using a single policy closure for this. So my next step will be here, and because this is going to be eventually glued closed, it'll be a lot easier if I ink it now. And you can see here where, maybe you can see where it tore out of the book and it tore a little bit. I can always put a little bit of faux vintage cello tape on the top of that when I'm done. So that's probably what I'll do. All right. Okay, so that's going to be this piece here. And now I will decide which of these that are pre-inked that I've got that I like coordinating with it. And I've got a whole bunch that are pre-inked, so it honestly doesn't really matter which one I choose. I just want one that's going to add some interest. Okay, and I like that one. Then what I'll do is, when I'm putting these in place, to hold it in place while I'm puncturing my hole, so I've got it set up like this, and I decided I want this one. Rather, I can have it up at the top, or I can have it in the center. Either way works. And just to mix things up, maybe I'll put this one in the center. Sure, why not? Or maybe I'll put this one down towards the bottom. Yeah, that's what I'll do, because I've got one towards the top here, I've got one in the middle here, I'll put this one towards the bottom. And this is the flap that I have not glued down, right? I've already glued down one flap. This is the flap I have not glued down. I'll try to get in the middle-ish, and I'll put it right there. And notice I just put a little dot of glue, and I do that to hold this in place. And I don't want to glue the whole thing down, because eventually I'm going to wrap some string around that. And I want that string to be able to wrap around it. That's how I get my policy closure. So I've glued it in place. Then I get a pokey tool, and I just use a piece of foam, craft foam, as a punch. And I'm going to open this piece up so that it's flat, because I only want to poke through my disc and the paper that it's directly sitting on. I don't want to poke through the whole thing. And then I will eyeball it and poke a hole in the center. And I'll grab one of the brads. And this one, it doesn't matter so much because I only need one. And I'm just going to use this size simply because this was the first size I grabbed. I've got an old muffin tin, very old cast iron muffin tin that I keep some of the ones I grab all the time right next to my desk. So I'll put this in and I'll fold it back. Now this section is going to be glued down, so this is not going to show. This spread brad is not going to show. If it was going to show, what I could do is use and I'll show you on another one, I'll cut that down and then I'll put a disc over it so that you don't see it. But this one isn't going to show. However, I do want to be able to tuck things in and out of that little pocket. So I'll get a piece of packing tape. Gorilla happens to be my favorite, but any packing tape will work. And I'll put a piece of packing tape on the back of it to hold it flat. That way when I push things in and out, they're not going to get caught underneath those prongs. So I'll put the tape down and then I flip it over and I push it down flat. Like I said, that just allows me to push it in and out of my pocket smoothly. And you're not going to see it because this is going to eventually be glued down. And that's what it looks like on the back. All right. Okay, next step. I'll take those clips off. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the other flap, the 1.5 inch flap. I'm going to glue the top and the bottom. And I'll fold it down on just this top piece, and I'll clip that just to hold it in place while it dries. These are, for those of you who may be new to my channel, these are quilters clips, and what I do, they've got little teeth on them when you get them. They're quilting there, I don't know, a bin of a couple hundred maybe for a few bucks on Amazon. They're not spendy at all. And what I do when I get them, because there's a little teeth on there that can leave teeth marks on paper, I just take an emery board, and this one's already had the teeth filed off, and then I move it up and down. I let it clamp close and I move it up and down, and then that makes it a smooth surface so you don't get those teeth clamp marks. So that's how I do that. Now I need to put my string on, and I'll just cut an extra long piece of string. I usually cut a little more than I need because it's string, and one little ball of string lasts a long time. Like I said, you can use embroidery floss, you can use a thinner lace, you can use sari silk, you can use seam binding, whatever you like. For the sake of these, because of the colors that I'm working with, I'm going to use string. Now you can see here that this is bent because remember I scored it and folded it. It's totally fine because eventually I'm going to glue this down on 3 sides on the back of my page. So that score, which is covered by this flap, isn't going to show and it's not going to bend. That way, that's why I was able to make all these folds even though I wasn't necessarily going to use them. All right, now I'm going to put this string, I'm going to use I tore that little piece of tape in half. I'm going to put it down in the back, and I want it to be mostly centered with my policy closure, my disc closure. So I'm just going to put it down like this and put my tape in place. Again, because this is going to be glued down in my book, this is not going to show at all. And here you have it. You could just do one side and not the other, so you don't have to have it go around both. Let's see. You can see that this disc, there we go. Sometimes just lifting it for the first time is a challenge, and after that it's pretty easy. Except my fingers are being, okay, there we go. So you could just use one string if you wanted. You don't have to necessarily use 2 strings. I just kind of liked the way it looked with 2 strings. And there is our first item. All right, that is number 1, and I'll push this back to the side. Now the next one, I've got 3 strips that are the same. I am going to do, let's see, which number is next. Okay, let's see, first cut at 7 inch. Okay, that's this one. This is the one that we cut at 7. This is, actually, I'm going to show you this one last, simply because this is the one I'm going to, remember I said I have an optional 5th piece that you can make if you choose. This is what I make just using the 12 by 12, but if I have one more scrap, this is the one I make. So I'm going to put that aside and show you what I mean at the end. Okay, so here, let's go with this piece, this item. It's this and this. These 2 are the ones. It's with a simple pocket in the back, the policy closure. Now you can tie this on. I didn't just for the sake of this, and a pocket in the front. Super, super quick and simple. All right, one of the strips, and this one we cut a 4-inch piece off and fold it in half. Okay, so we're going to trim this horizontally, take a 4-inch piece off, and I don't know that it matters much which way. Now this is very directional, so I want my front to read correctly, so maybe I'll cut 4-inch off like this, and because it's double-sided, I have choices. All right, so I've got a 4-inch piece and a 5-inch piece. I'm going to put aside my 5-inch piece for now. The 4-inch piece, I am simply going to fold in half, just like this. Now, if I'd cut this sideways so the print was sideways, it would be fine. But you can see right here, the print is upside down. And I'm not a huge fan of upside down print, so maybe I would take a piece of lace or netting or something. You can still see that. A piece of sari silk, a thicker piece of lace. This is just net, something, and sew it on. I can also put it, a Tracy label or an image or something over that when it's all said and done, if I don't want to see the upside down words, right? See, so I can cover it up that way. For the sake of this sample, I'm not going to worry about it. I do ink the top and bottom edges, simply because it's easier to ink them now before the whole thing is glued down. So folded in half, the 4-inch section folded in half, so it's about 2 inches. Then I've got this piece right here. And this piece I am going to score at 2 inches. So it's 5 inches horizontally, and I'm going to score it at 2 inches. And let's see, I want that down at the top. So in this case, I want this section, my flap, to be 2 inches wide. Because it's 5 inches here, I'm going to score at 3. I want a 2-inch section. So I'll score this at 3 inches. Fold that in half, and then that is my top flap. Now you can see, because of the paper that's on there, this isn't a great end or finish on this, so I'm going to trim a little bit off, only because of the image that I have on my paper. If this was, you know, a solid pattern cardstock or something with a little bit less directional, wouldn't make any difference at all. But I am going to trim that off because I do want it to look fairly even. Now I can leave it like this. I can turn it around and have it go like this. In fact, maybe I'll do that. I actually kind of like that. You can change the orientation, basically, with what you're making. I can turn this one the other way here and put it like this. Oh, that's kind of pretty too. Or I can do it like this. Oh, that's kind of pretty too. See, you have a lot of choices. Though, because this is cattywampus, it kind of makes the whole thing look a little bit off center, but that's also kind of fun. And then this whole bit is upside down. On the back, this whole piece is upside down. Obviously, I didn't play with this in advance, but how do I want to do it? Do I want my front pocket upside down? And then I can put something on that. Do I want this piece? Oh, okay, I really like that. I'm going to do it this way. I like that orientation. I like the way that looks. I like the color. Even though this is upside down, I can cover that with a flower or something. All right, so my 5-inch piece and my 4-inch piece. Now I need to re-ink these because I changed my mind on what it was going to look like. I can also glue on a strip later on if I want to. So my back pocket is going to be right side up, right? That's going to be my back pocket, yeah. And then my front pocket is going to be upside down. Before I glue anything in place, I am going to use the piece that's going to be my front pocket, and I'm going to find the center of that because I want to mark where my eyelets, not my eyelets, my divots, discs are going to go. So I'll line it up on my surface to make sure it's mostly centered. This one is 4 inches wide, so at 2 inches, I want it above the word received, and I want it below right here. So I'm going to mark those now so I know where to put them. And I'm also going, then I'm going to take them apart and I'll put a dot of glue on each one, just a little bit, because I only want the center to hold in place. Now I've got to figure out which of my colored discs. I've got just a little stack of pre-inked discs over here. So I'm going to put those in place. Sure, that's fine. And this one right here. Oh, that one's got discoloration on it. I want them to be about the same. So these two are about the same. Okay. And then I'll line them up, make sure they're mostly straight. They don't have to be perfect, but yeah, those are mostly straight. My discs are mostly lined up. And I will use that foam mat again and poke a hole in the center. Remember, this was folded in half, so it's flipped up, so I'm only poking a hole in one sheet of cardstock and in the center of my item. And if it's not perfectly centered, again, not a problem. There is the top, and then this is the 5-inch piece. This is the piece I've decided that I wanted to be my top, and this is the 2-inch section. The 3-inch section is going to be what's tucked into the fold. So I'll poke that here, poke it through, and then now I've got to get 2 eyelets that mostly match. And that'll mostly go with this paper too. I find most of the time if I use the antique brass ones, those match this paper line pretty darn well. There's an antique gold that works really well too, but let's just see whichever ones I grab first. I just want 2 of the same color. And I could sort them that way, but this is just as easy. See, you can see there, those are not the same color. I'm hoping that I've got some of the same color in here. Okay, good. 3 colors there. And 4 colors. All right, I'm doing great. I'll just put them down here. Rather than having them stick in my hands, I'll put them down here and see if we can't find a couple that are the same color. I know they've got to have some that are the same. Okay, and because I have big fingers, I will use my tweezers to pick this up. And let's see if I can maybe match color. All right, that one and that one. Yeah, those are the same. Those are the same color family. Okay, sorry about that. I probably should have had them put off to the side, but just keeping it real over here. I'll push those. Okay, I'll put the bottom brad in and spread that. Sometimes the brads, depending on how they stick together, I just use something like this Cricut tool to split them. That works really well. And then the top piece. Now I can ink this later, which is why I'm not inking it now. It's easy to ink later on. And then the top piece. Okay. This one, I am going to do what I told you and then just trim the ends a tiny bit. This is just basic wire cutters, jewelry makers wire cutters, so that they don't stick out the back of the disc. That's what this is for. And I'll push it down to make sure it's flat, because remember, this is going to be the top of my pocket. This is going to be the bottom of my pocket. And you can see I didn't make it go far enough down because it'll run into each other. So I'll just trim a little bit off the bottom of this. It's an easy fix. And that kind of fitting and things are things you do all the time when you're playing with paper. Okay, now it'll fit nicely. Or it should fit nicely. I don't know if it will. I haven't checked it. Let's see. Covers over the top, fits on the bottom. Great. All right, now, because again, I want to be able to tuck something in here without it catching, I'm going to use a little bit more of tape. And this is just a standard for me. You'll see it over and over. I use a bit of the packing tape on the back on almost everything like this, just because I don't want paper to get caught in that spread brad. Paper fasteners, brads, I don't remember, there's another name for split pins. There's a lot of names for this particular item, so whatever you call it, that works. And then I'm going to tuck this in here. Now, this is the 4-inch piece that's folded in half. I'm going to put, well, maybe I'm going to put glue on just the right edge and the left edge, because those top bits are going to be the pockets that open up, so I don't want to glue there. So right edge, left edge, and then the 2-inch scored piece will be up on top, and I will sandwich this in between. Now I have a little tiny bit of wiggle room so I can make sure they're straight and that it's tapped to the bottom. And again, I will use these quilt pins or quilt clips to hold it closed while it dries. It's not truly necessary, it's just easy. Now this piece that I just trimmed off with those wire trimmers, I'm going to take one of my single layer discs that I've already inked, and I'm going to glue around the whole thing. And I'll put that right on top. And that way it kind of hides that open split pin. And I'll flip it over and I'll push down so that that has an opportunity to adhere to. Now remember, this is open all the way around because I only put glue at the very center. See how that works? So I can still wrap my string around it, which was the whole purpose. All right, that should be dry by now. And again with the string, I'll just cut a little bit longer piece. I can trim it off later. When I am wanting to put beads on these, I'll just give you, for those of you who might be new, when I'm using string like this, and it'll work with embroidery floss or anything, I use my art glitter glue or barely art glue or reptile glue, and I put a drop of it on the end of the string, and then I roll it back and forth between my fingers, and I let it dry. And I do that because, and then I cut it off at the end, because, let's see if I've got a bead here, because it makes it easy to, here, I'll grab a bead to show you what I mean. It makes it really easy to put a bead on there. Here, just grab a bead bin, and let's do this one. I have no idea if this will match or not. I'm just grabbing a bead. That makes it easy to thread a bead. It just makes basically a needle so that I can thread a bead on. That's why I do it, so that I don't have to worry about the end of the string unwinding. See, just like that. And then I just trim it off at the end. So there's a tip. I can round these corners, and in fact, I probably would most of the time simply because I like it, but you don't have to if you don't have a corner rounder. You don't need to round it. Here, and I can even use a small round. This is We Are Memory Keepers corner rounder, and I only use this one because it's got 3 corner sizes on one punch. All right, there you go. Now I can wrap this around. I can tie this in a knot if I want, right here underneath, and then just use one string, or I can do what I did on the other and wrap it around like this. Doesn't matter. And there is the second. That's this piece right here. And now you've got a pocket on the inside, and you've got a pocket on the back. So you've got a pocket on the inside right here, and then you've got a pocket on the back. All right, so there's the second piece. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we did this one, we did this one. Okay, the third piece, let's do this one. And then the fourth is the optional piece. Okay, this one is oriented sideways, and it's very similar to the last one, except you've got a flap. I really like this one just because it's kind of a smooth profile, and you can put a notepad in here or not, but you've got 2 great side tucks. So I cut that, oops, oh well. And you've got 2 great side pockets. And then you can overlap them to hide that notepad if you want, or you don't even have to use a notepad. Here I use the same exact thing, but I put the policy closures out wide rather than in narrow. And I could have put a notepad in there again, but I've got a full pocket on the right and a full pocket on the left. Then when I glue this down, I've got a back pocket on it for a tag or a notepad or what have you. All right, so let me show you how to make that one. And it's similar, but not, again, not exactly the same. So I'm going to grab, I guess it doesn't really matter which one. Here, I'll take this piece, and I'll make sure I'm looking at my directions correctly, make sure I'm telling you the right one. I think, okay, yeah. So I score this. I want to say this is the 1 1/8. It is. All right, this one I score at 1 1/8. Score it at 1 1/8 and 2 1/2. 1 1/8 and 2 1/2, and then I'm going to flip it and do the exact same thing. I'm going to score it at 1 1/8 and 2 1/2. 1 1/8, 2 1/2. All right. Then I'm going to fold in on the inside score pieces. Right. Make sure it's mostly straight. I can use my bone folder because again, this is cardstock. Mostly straight. Even when you score it, you can still wiggle it a little bit, so it may not be perfectly straight. And then these flip back, just like that. All right, just like that. So it looks like this. And then when I close it up, this is what it's going to look like. Right, and I actually like that orientation. Now I am, because you can see here the top is frayed where I tore it out, I am going to trim it off just a tiny bit, take a sliver off of it. You don't have to. I mean, depending on what your paper looks like and what have you. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, just because I didn't fold it perfectly straight. So I'm going to just take a tiny little bit off that to make it straight. Okay. Now I'm going to open this back up. And I am going to ink, because I like ink these edges, because that's going to be glued down, and it's harder to ink it once it's glued. This, I'm going to ink this edge. Okay. Now on this one you can see I didn't have to put anything on the back. These discs are mounted underneath the glued down edges. On this one here, only the left one is glued, because I put them close here, I put them far away here. If you're going to put them far away, you need to do both before you glue anything else. You need to put your disc closures on before anything else. Here, you can put one disc closure on and the other, but honestly, for the sake of ease, I generally do all the disc closures at once so that I don't mess it up. All right, I've got ink, and I want it to be closed like this. When I'm all said and done, these are going to be glued down, right? I'm going to have the tuck on the right, the tuck on the left, and these are going to be my overlap closures. So I'm going to decide right here and now that I want these, because of the way this is oriented, I really want these at the top, though I could do them at the bottom, but then you'll see this has a little bit of a lift. But if I put a notepad in the center like I did on the other one, which is what I'll probably do, I could put them in the center. You know what? We'll put them in the center. Why not? Because I'm going to put them in the center, I want to make sure it's centered. It's going to open to the right and to the left, so I'm going to turn it on its side so I can use my grid mat to make sure that what I'm doing is centered. And I leave it closed, so I make sure that I leave myself enough room for my policy closure. You can see there where I put the glue, at least I hope you can see. I want to make sure that, I kind of like that. That's a little bit of a pinkish tinge to it. I want to make sure that it's 1, centered, and 2. Do I have another one of those? Yeah, I do. Good. And 2, that this opening doesn't catch on the disc closure. So like that. I'll just push them down for a moment. All right, so this will be a center closure. Now I'm going to poke my holes again. Where did I put my pokey tool? Here it is. I'm going to poke my holes, again making sure that I've only got one layer of cards so I don't poke through an area where I don't want a hole. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. And I'm trying to get it centered, but if it's not perfect, that's okay. Push it through, and again, got to find 2 more brads that mostly match. Oh, I think I got lucky. No, those are 2 different sizes. Well, of course they are. Maybe that one? Yeah, I think those are the same. Okay. Now I'm going to put the brads through. Sorry, I got that. Oh, and I made the brad fly away. Where the heck did that go? All right, well, maybe it's probably in my sleeve, I guess. I don't know what I did with it. I had 2 there, and then it flew away. So let's see if I can find another one that looks like that. It flew somewhere. Oh, I just heard something hit the deck. Oh, let's pull out some more and see if I can find another one like that. This is kind of a more gold, but it's not a bright gold. Nope, that's a different gold. Well, heck. Okay, those 2 are the same. I'm going to split this one. This is what there we go, what I was talking about. Split that one, and now this one. Putting it in, splitting it. Okay. Now I want it to be folded like this. It's going to be oriented like this. So this one is going to be glued down. So I'm going to put a piece of that packing tape right on here. And I want to make sure that I don't get the packing tape on the crease because that piece is going to show. Okay, so packing tape down, flip it over and push it flat. Now I'm going to glue this closed, and I'm only going to, so I've got scored outside flap, scored inside flap. I'm only going to put glue on this top and bottom of the scored inside flap because that's the part I want to glue down. Lay that over and clamp both edges. Okay, and now it's going to be like this. And so you can see here, this piece is going to show. I'm going to trim that again with, I'm just going to cut, I don't cut them all the way off, but I just trim it down a little bit to make sure it stays underneath that disc that I place on top. It's still enough of an arm split to hold the brad in place, but it's also not so much that it'll poke outside of the discs. Okay, now I'm going to glue a single layer disc on top of that. I just have to, I've got them all mixed together now on my work surface. I just need to get a single layer disc. There we go, a single layer disc, and I'll cover that up. Again, I like to put glue as close to possible as the outside edges because that's the part I want to make sure stays flat. It also helps hold it in place, holds the brad in place because all the brad is doing is acting as an anchor. I'll push down on that. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not going to glue on the outside crease, the first flap. I'm going to glue just on the inside at the top and the bottom because those are going to be folded over. And I'll fold those over and clamp those down. Actually, this has had enough time to dry. I can just transfer them. Okay, and I obviously ink these before I'm done, and then I'll fold this down, and I'll grab my string. And again, I will often use a tool like this just to make sure it's lifted all the way around. It shouldn't be glued because I only put a tiny dot of glue, but it just makes it a little easier to wrap the string around. All right, and I can do 1, 2, 3 times as many or as few as I want. You know, all you really truly need is one wrap. I could even just wrap it like that. It'll hold it closed because if the whole goal is to hold it closed, well, it's going to do that. And then there is this piece. You've got your right flap, your left flap, tucks on the right, or tucks on the left, tucks on the right, and this particular one has a notepad in the middle. And you can put a notepad there or not if you choose. All right, that's number 3. This one, this is as easy as it comes as far as, well, you know what, we'll just do it. Let's just do it. I am going to cut this one to 7 inches because this one needs to be a little bit narrower. It doesn't have as many folds and such. And this is the same thing as this one. I just put a little bit of lace on the edge of this one, so you could, little bits of lace 2024 if you want to. I just thought it looked pretty with a little bit of lace sewn over the edge. All right, and here I just, because I sewed lace on this one as well, don't know if you can see that, I put the disc covers down to make, you know, a pocket here and a pocket here, just to make 4 pockets rather than 2 pockets, you know, however you want to do that. But you don't even need these side pieces. Those are with just scrap pieces. In this case, they're scrap pieces of coffee dyed tracing paper. They can be extra scraps of paper. You don't even need anything there. You can put a notepad or a belly band, or just leave them blank depending on how thick you want to make your piece. But the basic construction of this piece is really easy. So I'm going to, because it's 9 inches and I want it to be 7 inches, I am going to take 2 inches off. And maybe I'll take 2 inches off this side. I don't know that it matters much. I'm going to take 2 inches off. All right, so now it is 4 inches tall, 7 inches wide. I am going to score this one at 1.5 inches. So if this is 7 inches wide, I need to score it 1.5 inches on the right, and I'm going to flip it around and score 1.5 inches on the left. And with a 7-inch piece, if you score them each at 1.5, it should allegedly meet in the middle. For some reason, it's not. What did I do wrong? Let's see, 7-inch score at 1.5. Okay, that worked. 7. Did I not score one of these at 1.5? No, I did. So this should work. Okay, and then you just score it twice. 1.5, 1.5, and 7. Okay, well, I'm not quite sure why it's not exactly perfect, but the other 3 are. So I'm just going to hold this together in the center because I do want them to touch, and then I'll push down. And the other 2 1.5 inches worked. And you can see I didn't push it perfectly. That's okay. I can trim a little bit off the top and a little bit off the bottom, and then my non-perfect folding won't matter in the least. If you need it to be exactly 4 inches, well, you can always add a little bit of paper, or you can add lace, which will make the height a little bit higher. All right, so then they match. And then all I do for this one is open it up, trim this piece down to the center dimension, which I believe is 3.5 inches. It is, it's 3.5 inches. And I make it just a shy 3.5. And the reason I do that is so that the pocket doesn't impede on the folds. So I make that just I guess, I don't even want to say 3 5/8, or, I mean, let's see, that was 3 inches. 2 7/8. It's more like just a trim. It's just a shy 3 inches. I'm going to ink the top of that because I can, and the edges. And now I glue this down right here. See, because that way it doesn't create bulk and it doesn't cause the pocket to buckle when I glue it in place. And then I'll glue the 3 sides of the pocket, making sure to leave the top of the pocket open so that I can actually make it a pocket. Glue that down, and I can clamp it or not. And I usually just like tuck it right into the edge of the fold to make sure that I've got it where I want it. Just like that. And then I put the policy closures on just like I did before. Now you can, like I did here, use scraps of paper to make pockets on the inside. And before you put the policy closures on, you can sew lace on or glue lace on if you'd like to, like I did on this one, so you can see the differences. I'm not going to show you how to do that because we've seen 3 of these policy closure, how they put on, to the exact same way that I did the other ones. So that's the 4th piece. However, I wanted another option with this because this is pretty similar to the last one we did, and though I like it and it's a great option, I wanted to have one more option. So this is not, you can use the same exact paper cut to the same measurements with the addition of 1 scrap of paper. To make this variation on it, instead of making this piece, I used that 4-inch strip, and I think I've got, well, mine's only 3 inches wide, but here, I'll use this one. I've got a scrap here and a scrap here. Got a couple scraps of paper. This is, let's see, I don't cut it to 7 inches. Let's see, let me make sure I'm at the right one. So I've got this one, this one, this one. Okay. This is an option, and the way it looks and the way it works is this. Here's a little notepad in the back, a side notepad, and then it lifts up, and here you've got a back pocket and then a pocket right here, and it closes down. So this was really inspired by one that I did on one of my previous videos where I cut the bottoms off and I had the tuxedo type pocket. But I wanted to alter it just a little bit, and so that's what I did. And I wanted to be able to use it with this 4x4. So you can see this is 3 inches with this 12x12 paper pad. So it's an option with a 12x12 paper pad. I am going to cut this down. Let me make sure I'm not telling you the wrong thing. So this one's going to be 9 inches, just like the others were. So I'm going to cut 3 inches off. This scrap that I had of another paper just happened to be 12 inches. So I'm going to cut 3 inches off of it, so it's 9 inches. Now this will work the same exact way, whether my width is 4 inches or whether my width is 3 inches. I had a 3-inch piece, so that's what I'm going to use. Then I am going to score this twice at 3 inches and at 6 inches. 3 inches, or I can flip it over and score it at 3 inches. I generally tend to do that. Oops, that I scored it at 2. Oops. Good job, Corey. 3 inches and 3 inches. That's okay, it won't show. Doesn't matter. 3 inches and 3 inches. And you see how it buckles because of the score line takes up some of the paper. So what I'll do then is I'll trim just a little sliver off both edges so that it lays nice and flat. And when I say a sliver, I do mean like just a tiny little sliver. I'll trim a sliver off both of the pieces. So that way I'm sure that when I fold it, it will fold and lay flat. All right, I need that. So here and here. And it doesn't matter which piece is the top or which piece is the bottom. It really doesn't matter. It's just a matter of, let's see what it looks like. I like that. All right, now I'm going to open it up and I am going to cut at an angle. Now I don't have a specific angle and I want this one on top, so it is going to be the deeper angle. I'm going to make this a deeper angle and you'll see what I mean in a minute. I'm going to use the crease as my guideline and I'm going to lay the tip of the scored crease into my paper cutter. You can use an X-Acto knife and a ruler, but the key is to get the tip of where your score is to be the cutting point start. And then I'm just going to cut off a triangle. Okay. Now this is going to be my top piece. So when I cut the triangle off the other one, I want to make sure it's not quite as steep of an angle, if that makes sense. So like if this piece were here, I want to make sure that the angle I cut from the other corner to the other piece isn't quite as steep or deep. But I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get the tip and I'm cutting the top. I want to make sure I cut the top on both pieces. I'm going to put the tip of my score line into my paper trimmer and make sure that the tip of the corner, let's see if you can see that, the tip of the corner is at the tip of my cutting. And now I'm making my angle less steep. You can see there I'm making it just less steep. I'm taking off less of the paper. And let's see, about right about that. Okay. And you can see here on the two pieces that I cut less of one than the other, right? Whoops, sorry about that. Less of one than the other, much smaller section. Because, and as I ink this, you'll see what I mean. And then I'll ink this edge just so it stands out. Well, and also because I'm going to glue it and it's easier to see. And I'll do this one. Okay. And that is my quote-unquote tuxedo pocket. So you can see the back cut is a lot higher. And that's what gives me my back pocket and my front pocket. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to take my scrap. And in this case, because it was a 12-inch section, I'll just use this. I am going to use this piece to make my front flap. And the way I do that is this, okay? So in this case, it happens to be 3 inches, but I'm going to cut it to just shy of, or just to the same size. So you can see how it's just a little bit bigger because of the folds, right? And I'm going to trim just a tiny bit of that off. And I don't know that it matters which side I trim off, but I'm going to make it just a little less than the 3 inches that it was. Any scrap of paper, it doesn't even have to be the same paper line. I'm going to cut that down. Now I want this to be my flap. right? This is going to be my policy closure. So I want to make sure that this flap that I'm going to put on, this cover basically, covers the bottom line of my front pocket. So when I put it in place, I'm going to lay it down just below that. See? I'm going to lay it down just below so that when I wrap it around and over the top, I'm sure it'll cover where I need. So I'm just going to glue that down just like that, right? I've creased it over to glue it down. I just made a score and I didn't measure it because it depends on the kind of scrap you've got. But my key was to make sure it's the same width as my tuxedo pocket. And then I'm going to slip this right over the top. So I want to make sure it's the right size. And I want to make sure that it covers the bottom of this pocket. All right, now I'm going to glue this down to the back of my envelope. Or not envelope, the back of my tuxedo pocket. It's not an envelope. All right, glue that in place. Match these two up and glue that in place. Cardstock to cardstock. And this is what's going to give me my flap for my tuxedo pocket, or my policy closure. Right? And I'm going to use the bone folder because I didn't score it perfectly. I just folded it over. There you go. Now, before I glue anything down, I'm going to make my marks for my policy closure. Again, I'm going to use this as my guide, and I think this was 4 inches. Oh, it was 3 inches wide, excuse me. Use 3 inches wide, so at 1.5 inches, I'm going to put a mark here and a mark here. All right. Now I'm going to put the discs on. Here, let's see, what have I got that's close? Yeah, that looks pretty good. That one looks, oh, I barely have enough room. I'm glad I did that where I did it. I'm going to trim this just a tiny bit because I made it really close with that disc because of the size disc. So I'm going to trim just a smidge of this off. And that'll make sure that I've got room for my disc. And then I'll glue this disc in place. And do I want that? Do I want that? I'm just looking to see what my options are. I honestly don't know. These are all scrap bits that I've had, so I want to make sure that I've got 2 colors that are somewhat comparable that'll work together. And if I needed to make a disc, this would be a great time to make a disc, but I'm sure I've got something that will work. Okay, that'll work, and that'll work. Okay. I'm going to use those dots as my guideline. Again, just a dot of glue and a dot of glue. Make sure they're mostly even, and put that in place, and put that in place. Okay. Whoops, I moved that with my finger. I'll hold them in place just for a second, and then I'll do the same thing that I did before. I haven't glued my arms down yet for this because I want to make sure that I put my closure in place first. So I'll open it up. Oh, there you go. This is what it kind of looks like, opened up. And I could round these corners if I wanted to, or leave them square. It doesn't really matter. This is what it kind of looks like. And I'm going to poke a hole in the center of this one, center-ish, and the center of this one. Okay. I'll use the tool to poke it all the way through because these brads are a little bit, split pins, brads, what have you, are a little bit bigger. Now let's see if I can find 2 that are about the same color. It's been a challenge all the way through, so let's just see if I can. That one's mostly silverish. And that one's mostly silverish. Yeah, those look like they're the same. And there's some gray in here, so that color will work just fine. Yeah, there's some gray in this paper. And this is kind of like a, I don't know, brushed silver maybe? I'm not sure. I'll put that down there, split that pin, and I'll put this one here. Now, in one of the samples that I made, I used 2 different pins. One had like a little, the color was the same, but they had a different top. So do check. Yeah, those are the same. Do check to make sure that they match before you glue anything down, just to make sure you're not disappointed. Or maybe you don't want them to match, and if you don't, that's okay too. I'm going to trim those again so that the disc that I put on top hides that, hides that brad altogether. Okay. And a lot of times, because the brad is rounded, I'll just push it down on a flat surface from the bottom side to make sure it's all the way down. And again, I will use a piece of tape, clear packing tape, to cover that so it doesn't catch, and I'll push down. Right now, I am going to fold the inside arm, that's the one with the shorter cut, and then the outside arm. I'll glue right along the bottom of this inside arm flap, glue that down, and then along the bottom of the outside arm flap, and glue that down, and I will clamp these closed for the sake of ease. You can see there's a little bit of glue seepage coming out. I'll wipe that off at the end, won't be a problem. Okay, now I'm going to put a disc, a single disc, to hide that on the top. And I could have used that color. I think I even have some here. Sure, why not? That'll work. And if I want to, I can even clamp that to hold it in place while it dries. And that is this pocket. Now, I actually like this one a little better with this corner rounded, but I don't see where I threw my corner rounder. So, oh, here it is. So I'm going to round those corners. But you don't have to. I mean, rounding corners is personal preference. It's not needed for anything. All right, and now I've got a tuxedo pocket. I just do the same exact thing with the string that I've done all the way along. I've got the flap one, tuck one, tuck two, and closure on here. Now see, I should probably still trim this down a little bit more, but you know what? It just exactly touches. So those are the 5 options. Again, this one is an option to this, but you do need a scrap piece of paper. So keep that in mind if you're wanting to make that option. Okay, those are the 4+1 pieces that you can make with one 12 by 12 paper. And the last thing I said I'd do is I told somebody asked about the file folders and how I make these. Oh my goodness, my area is a mess. All right, so how I make these. Super, super, super simple. I use a rectangular piece of paper. Now this is one of the tools that I highly recommend. Oh, let me put that mat back so you don't see those lights. Okay. This is just an old cutting mat. This is a We Are Memory Keepers mini envelope punch board. It's the small one. I bought this, I don't even know how many years ago, and it was maybe $5. And I believe you can get them on Amazon now for not much more. I use this significantly more than my larger envelope board. But if you're looking for a tool that's a wonderful investment, not only can you make envelopes with this, but you can make file folders. So I'm going to grab a piece of rectangular paper. Well, let's cut this one in half and make this 2. It's just single-sided rectangular paper. This is a great way to use leftover digitals as well. Doesn't matter the size, doesn't really matter the pattern, just a rectangle, right? Then what I do, personal preference again, I round all 4 corners of this rectangular piece. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, I find it easier to do it this way. Maybe somebody else will tell you different. This is going to be the outside of my file folder. So I flip it over like this, and I use my envelope punch board, and I line it up in the back, right? I line it up in the back. The top of the paper touches the corner of my envelope punch board, or about. It doesn't have to be perfect, but about. And then I move it to about 1 inch or so-ish, and I punch. And that's what it looks like on this side. Then you can do one of 2 ways. If you've got a Fiskars trimmer, you can just trim it. You can use a straight edge. You can use a pair of scissors. I don't tend to cut so straight, so I prefer to do it this way to make sure I'm cutting straight. So I'll use an X-Acto, not an X-Acto knife, like an X-Acto knife and a straight edge. And I'll pull it, line it up straight, and I'll cut straight down to the top. the top and the bottom. I'm just cutting off those top and bottoms pieces. Now, then this is the reason I do this. I want this little leftover piece to help me make my corner round. You can leave it square, of course, but I like the rounded corner and I want them to match. So I'm going to take this and use it as my guide to cut off the bit of that corner. Now my eyeballs are old, so it's hard to see. I would normally use my magnifying thing, but I'll cut that bit off so that my corner is rounded. Yeah, close enough. Oh, I didn't. So you can see I didn't cut it very well. Darn it. Normally I use the magnifier and it allows me to see it a little bit better. Okay, and we're going to pretend I cut that well, and then I'll use the same thing here and I'll cut my bottom corner. Because of the file folder lip, you can't cut it after. It won't tuck in. That's the reason I cut that. I round it first so that I can use that as my guideline. And generally, if I'm not, when I'm using it with my magnifier, I can see it really well and I round it really easily. So now I have a piece that looks like this. This is the inside of my file folder. I roll it over and I leave myself, I don't know, anywhere from 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch from one edge to the next, just kind of like a file folder would, and I push it down. And there it is. You can make these as narrow or as wide as you want. And then I'll, of course, ink the edges. I can put flowers on it, like here I've got some flowers or some butterflies, flower stickers. See, here's a tall one. This is a wide one. Here's a standard one. Just super quick and easy way to make the file folders. So for the person that asked, there you go. That's how I make the file folders. I've almost got the journal, the file folder journal finished, and I'll share that when I do. I think I've got one more piece that I want to show with you guys, but hopefully that'll come up this next week, and then we'll move on to another project. I've got a long list of things that I'd like to share, so we'll get to them eventually. But here are those fun policy closure options. So policy closure options, and these are the, you can see I didn't tie these on, so a lot of these strings are loose. Here's that one. There you go. As always, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I will do my best to get back to you in a timely manner. And thank you for watching. Happy creating.